So today I am joined by Jaz. Jaz, thank you so much for being willing to do this. Could you maybe start off by just telling us a little bit about you, the work you do in mental health and addiction recovery, and kind of what led you into this space?
Of course. We've only got an hour though, so cut me off.
Fine.
Oh,
Are you going to go off on some tangents for me?
I mean, I talk a lot, so I never quite know how much to give. I've been working in this space for 10 years,
Yeah.
um, and I am a behavioural coach, or some people refer to me as a recovery coach. When I started out, I was mostly referred to as a recovery coach, but
Right.
the I found that title it's a little reductive and a little narrow. So I sort of realized that a lot of what I did was much broader than that. And the word recovery is quite complicated for lots of people because it can be quite synonymous with a particular type of well-being, more abstinence-based around substances or 12-step programs, and often forgotten that the word recovery means so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah.
So I never wanted to work in this industry,
Right.
and that the context of that is I myself am in a form of abstinence-based recovery, and have been since I was a teenager. And when I got sober when I was 19, lots of people were training. Lots of people were moving into this industry,
Yeah.
and I honestly think it was just being oppositional. I was just like, I refuse. I'll do other things.
I'm not going to follow
Um,
the crowd here.
yeah, and I'd also not finished school. I'd never gone to university. I think I was quite nervous about finding out if I went back into that space that I couldn't cope with it.
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up quite circuitously being invited into more support roles by people who I built relationships with who worked there, who just thought I might add value in a peer support
Right.
fashion. Just because of my own particular set of circumstances, which was I'd gotten sober very young and was in and out of music. So that I was sort of, I think, breadcrumbed into this work by people who saw that I might be able to have value in supporting other people who had a similar experience to mine. And I'm really, really grateful they did because I had no idea that I would become so passionate about this.
Yeah.
And my personal experience was that I found existing in the world excruciating
Okay.
from quite a young age, and then I went out to find ways to make it less excruciating.
Would you mind me asking, when you say from quite a young age, what's your earliest memory of feeling that way?
Oh wow. Um, it was. I mean, it was young.
The reason I ask this actually is because, and of course, there's no one universal story, but I think for a lot of neurodivergent people in particular, they are really aware that something doesn't quite feel, I don't want to say the word right, or that they feel slightly different, or that they find the world really difficult. And I think sometimes, professionals may not be aware that actually that can run really deep and be really historic for a lot of people, right back to early childhood.
Yeah. So somewhere it's not necessarily the most distinct thing for me because of my own personal
Sure.
experience, but somewhere around probably about the age of 6. And a lot of this I put words to after the fact
Sure.
by going through processes with therapists and going through my own learning about that and being able to contextualize it as an adult. Because at the
Yeah.
time, I think what you said, something was off or something
Yeah.
wasn't quite right,
Yeah.
and I didn't know if that was supposed to be the case, so I didn't share it with anyone
Yeah.
because I thought if I did, people would be like, "What do you mean you don't know how to do that, or you don't feel
Yeah.
that way?" Or that's very
Yeah.
odd, and I didn't really want to make it visible that perhaps I was lacking in something.
Sure. Sure. No, thank you for sharing that so honestly. I think, I mean, I certainly relate to that. And I've shared, I think, on this podcast many times about my earliest memories being sort of surgically detached from my mother at the age of 2 at nursery and at the age of 4 sitting in a locker room, not knowing which shoes to put on because we had indoor and outdoor shoes. And everyone else seemed to just know how to do these things. Yet I would just sit there staring at the shoes, and all the labels that come along with it. She doesn't work to the best of her ability. She's difficult. She's dramatic, and feeling sort of like not enough and too much simultaneously.
Yeah. That's a really great way of putting it. And I think what's really important is that like a lot of those sayings or collections of words like you just used, feeling not enough and too much simultaneously. And I think if I had maybe heard that or read that in some way at an early age, the hope is that I would have realized or come to realize that there were people, adults, people
Mm.
in who had developed lives of meaning and joy and purpose that also understood that experience I was going through. And I think
Yeah.
that was such a big driver for me coming into this work when I was like, oh, actually, actually, if I'd had a version of that myself, that would have been great. So is there a way that I can give that to someone so that they don't feel in any, hopefully like I did? So,
So you mentioned that you got sober in your teenage years, but I was going to ask you, like, how do you, and you've touched on it already, but how do you feel that your own neurodivergence kind of intersected with the place that you sort of ended up?
I mean, so I was diagnosed as an adult. I think I was diagnosed about 3 years ago.
Yeah,
Um, and I hadn't sought it. In fact, I'd never even entertained the question that I might be. I was like, no, no one's ever put that in front of me, until someone did,
yeah,
and then offered to take me through the assessment. And I think what that did was it made me look back over that time with yet another like lens.
yeah,
And I think that if I look at my experience, and it wasn't the substances that led me into this place of recovery, but long before that, there were other things. I'd been hospitalized for an eating disorder when I was 16. And so there were, even before that, looking through that, I was going, oh, there's some quite dramatic, quite drastic failed attempts to solve a problem that I'm experiencing. Um, and I think if I look at the constant need for novelty, being very, very driven by things that I'm interested in, and being almost unable to summon up the desire to do things I'm not interested in, I'd always written that off as I'm inconsistent, fairly lazy,
yeah,
and like quite petulant.
yeah,
And a big one was oppositional.
yeah,
I'd always just thought, oh, I've just got a slightly underdeveloped sense of community. It's just if people ask me to do things, my instant reaction is, don't tell me what to do,
yeah,
even if it was a thing I wanted to do in the first place.
yeah, yeah,
And I just thought, oh, there's me being ridiculous. So I think looking back on it again, I think it would have been I was lucky in some regards because a lot of it was missed, partly because, and I think a lot of my childhood, a lot of the quantifiers were how is school going? How is the objective presentation of mental health, and
yeah,
is there a social group and interests, and I had a lot of these things. I think
yeah,
I was fortunate. I think academically I peaked at 7. I did very well then, and I think that hid quite a lot. And then it wasn't until I was much older that I realized within that actually I'd never really developed a large number of things associated, and that I now know are associated with ADHD, and I really just got through based on uh, pattern recognition, deadlines, and fear of getting into trouble if I miss them. And
yeah,
that ran out of steam, really. I
yeah,
think I think I started engaging in whatever it was, behaviors or new relationships with people and objects and me. And I started to think, oh, this is how people tolerate their world. Now I get it. So I'm looking around at adults who've built this whole universe for themselves, and I'm going, oh, okay, so that's why you drink, and that's why you go there on holiday, and that's why you have that relationship with those people, and that's why whether you spend your time invested in that, um, you know, uh, give it like voluntary role or supporting that sports team, whatever it is. You. I was like, it was a very negative outlook, but I was like, life is really draining, really exhausting, and not built for me to cope in.
yeah,
But now I understand.
yeah,
That's why you exist. You exist to do those things, to round off those sharp edges. Um, and now looking back on it, I'm like, oh right, I was sort of, you know, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what I needed, and I was
yeah,
doing the best with my limited
yeah.
knowledge to solve a problem.
In services, addiction and neurodivergence can sometimes be almost treated as sort of separate things. Why does that matter, and what do you think gets missed when they are split?
So much is missed. So when we consider the complicated interplay of a human being who is so diverse and rich in experience, and there's so many things which interplay with each other just in that one single system, reducing that to one external resource is slightly absurd. So I think treating things in silo, like sort of in a siloed way, means that we are narrowing a human being's experience to one
Yeah,
title. And I think like the ecosystem that we all are, and how nothing that we experience really exists in isolation, means it's really difficult to tackle anything like that. It has to be tackled in a more integrated and an expansive manner. And I think also you can't expect every professional or professional organization to specialize in everything that they are encountering.
Mm.
So in order to create, a working group of organizations or individuals who can work cohesively, they should be allowed to specialize in particular presentations or particular modalities, and that's really important. But then they should communicate or be
Yeah,
able to communicate
there
with
needs,
others.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think where I'm thinking about kind of live examples is perhaps people who come into treatment centres and perhaps they are identified, perhaps they're not, as autistic, for example, and they're sent along to 12-step meetings. And if they don't want to go to the meetings, they're perhaps seen as resistant or not willing to work a program and not really wanting recovery. But actually, what's not being factored in is the fact they've not seen maybe an occupational therapist who's done a sensory assessment and has perhaps, thought about the fact that maybe that's just not going to be doable for them, or maybe this person needs ear defenders, or maybe they need to be told in advance what the meeting's about to create predictability. But I think I'm thinking about how, as clinicians, we really need to find ways to like integrate all of these things, because otherwise we kind of set people up to fail when we're not looking at things much more holistically.
Hmm. And I think that the common thread through that was, quote unquote, they are resistant to something.
Yeah,
I think this conversation comes up perennially, which is, does someone want to get well? Does someone want to do the work? Are they able to? Can they tolerate it? And if not, then it comes down to, well, you don't want this enough.
yeah,
And that is sort of, I run into it in almost every sector of
yeah,
the wellness industry. Even if that is down to just, dieting culture and exercise and that. Well, if do you want to look like X,
yeah,
then you have to. So it's I think what it is there is a moral framework that people apply to
absolutely.
wellness,
Yeah,
which is it's really self-defeating and it's not fair.
yeah,
It's kind of an I, from a position of wellness or tolerance, I have the capacity in the agency to make a decision to engage in something or not. So if I choose not to, I can say to myself, yeah, right now I'm not willing to. What we forget is that we have experienced times in our lives, and personally I've experienced plenty of them, where my ability to make that decision is so severely impacted
yeah,
that it's not down to like my innate resources. It's not an appropriate quantifier to use. So I don't like that statement when I
yeah.
hear it going, they're not ready.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And actually, I'm thinking about some of my own experiences as well, where I was most definitely seen as incredibly difficult, non-compliant, resistant, nightmare, all the rest of it. And I think that's actually what was going on for me and how dysregulated my nervous system was. And we know when people are really dysregulated and their nervous systems are like all over the place, you can't even, get in contact with that side of your brain that can make informed choices, or your cognition isn't fully online. And I think one of the things I try to do as a clinician is, if there is an issue or somebody doesn't seem to be engaging or they're seen as too complex, I think to myself, okay, what's standing in the way,
Mm.
and rather problem solve it and troubleshoot it, which was kind of leading me on to my next question about kind of, you know when people are described as complex or hard to engage, what's your sense of what's going on underneath?
I think rightly so, people should be considered complex.
Okay.
I think it is possibly the only fair appraisal of a human being. Hard to engage, I would disagree.
Okay.
Um,
So what do you think that's about?
I would hope. I would hope. And there will be anomalies within this. This is not an exhaustive research, scientific, analysis of
It's
this.
just your experience, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think there are it's less about the message that's attempting to be communicated with an individual, or that they're attempting to communicate with us or the world. It's more that the language that or the individual that's representing that conversation hasn't felt right for that individual. When I'm presented with that, here's someone they're very complex and they're very hard to engage. My first thing is, okay, sure, I'd like to know who this human being is, because I haven't been told anything other than they're complicated and
Yeah,
difficult to work with.
yeah,
Um, that was your experience. It may be mine. It may not be. I may not be the right person for that, but I may know
yeah,
someone who communicates in a way which is fantastic for that. I think that my personal experience really wasn't about what was being said, it's how it was said to me.
yeah, yeah. No, I think my experience very much was a lot of times, and things have moved on massively now, or at least I really hope they have. Where a lot of recovery spaces, well, to me, felt quite punitive and quite punishing, and I already, didn't feel like a massively wonderful human being, and I didn't need to be told that. and sort of going the hard approach with me just never ever worked. And the person who made that real difference was actually the first person that I genuinely believed in me, and pretty much told me that. Just that shift just made such a difference.
Yeah. And I think as you're saying, with there are lots of recovery processes which can be quite punitive. But basically, if we're talking about like abstinence-based recovery, you have things which are abstinence equates quality, lack of abstinence equates,
Yeah,
dangerous behavior or self-destruction, or you're not doing the right stuff. I'm not really sure. And I think that that is, I understand why it exists and I understand how it's really important. It is in my own sobriety is a hugely important thing for me. Um, and also I recognize that for other people having such a uh, clear, delineated thing, as we were saying earlier about the moral framework,
yeah.
an individual who can't separate that from moral framework, it basically means if you're not in absence-based recovery, it equates to some form of failure.
Well, yeah, and I think I'm also just thinking about sometimes some of the language, if we talk about, 12-step recovery, which I honestly think is brilliant and is so helpful, but like everything, things are nuanced. And I think inadvertently, even some of the language in 12-step recovery can be problematic for neurodivergent people because we're talking about things like defects of character. For a lot of neurodivergent people, they have lived their life being told they're a defect. And I certainly, again, remember things like being told I was dramatic or, selfish or self-seeking, where again, actually, I experienced my emotions really intensely and I had no idea how to manage them. And then being told things like, we just need to go and help a newcomer, as example, that was not going to calm my nervous system down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's everything with a bit of nuance and a bit of understanding.
But I think that is it. I think if I'm with you, the 12-step programs have, they've given me so much and continue to give me so much. I think I was really fortunate. I had a couple of people around me who helped translate some of it for me. Going there, so that's what it says there. But this is a way that you're allowed to interpret it. You have the ability to apply it to your own experience in a way that feels comfortable. And if it doesn't feel comfortable, that piece you don't necessarily need to
Yeah.
go any further with. I think that one of the things that comes up for me a lot is the concept of manageability
Yeah.
in
Which
all
again, yeah,
things.
absolutely. And your life will become,
Yeah.
your life was unmanageable. What happens if you have ADHD and you've not learned to, do things differently with the way that your brain works, and you're a couple of years in and you're sober and your life is still unmanageable? Does that mean that you're working the program wrong?
And I think I struggle with that, and I worked through this long before I was diagnosed with ADHD,
Yeah,
and it created a very moralizing framework in my head, which is if things were unmanageable, my head just went, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing it right, I'm not applying myself,
yeah,
properly. And whilst it did begin to build a framework to understand that I needed to tend to all areas of my life, and I'll take that piece. Yes, I
yeah,
totally agree. I need to tend every part of my existence
yeah,
because it's all equally important to, the ecosystem of a jazz. But I need to be really careful not to cross that threshold into if if I haven't cleaned up my kitchen properly, that doesn't mean I've failed in anything,
yeah,
and give myself a period of grace in that.
yeah, yeah,
I think is that if we can act as almost like a buffer to if that's a working framework that someone
yeah,
wants to connect with, and we can then help them understand in terms of a communication that really sits well with them. Try to remove some of the stigma, some of the shame, some of the
yeah,
guilt-based processes behind it. Then they get to engage in a wonderful framework,
yeah,
hopefully without that like negative anchor holding them
yeah,
down.
yeah. I'm just looking down at some of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and I think we've actually like breezed through quite a few of them, but I'll just go through it quickly. Which is like, how does neurodivergence, particularly autism and ADHD, intersect with mental health difficulties and substance use? I think we've kind of touched on that a lot, and I think what I would add in is, we need to think about people's unique relapse risks in terms of people using substances to manage sensory overwhelm, to dial things up, to dial things down. That a lot of neurodivergent people do come from trauma, having been told that they're defective, and then a path on to using something like that might help them. That there are these sort of intersections that are helpful to kind of think about.
Definitely. And I think as I've learned more and more about my own ADHD, and then I've gone back and looked at my recovery processes, I've realized more and more I've got no idea what addiction is.
Yeah,
And so much of it overlaps here. So it has raised so much of a need, I think, for this conversation to become just broader. And I think especially when you look at abstinence-based models, like for me personally, abstinence is crucial,
Sure.
absolutely crucial. It's a bedrock of my existence. That doesn't mean it has to be for everyone. It doesn't mean it needs to be for everyone.
Yeah,
And I think as someone who works within that space, within addiction,
yeah,
it is vital that I remain open to as many avenues of wellness and as many new approaches and understandings of what an individual might require.
yeah.
So that sometimes, so that I don't end up becoming a sort of self-biased echo chamber.
I literally couldn't agree with you more. I just don't think there are universal experiences to anything. And I think everyone is unique. And some people absolutely gel with disease concept, 12 step, addiction, other people are able to maybe give up substances and then drink successfully a little while later. Some people mesh with, different approaches to get there. I think it's about us supporting people in an honest way that works for them and also understands all of these intersections. I think any approach that's just one size fits all is going to miss out a hell of a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think that's such, I think a message that I hear a lot is is we're really lucky, especially within recovery circles, that the individuals who stick around and are able to stick around, they're lucky and they are the lucky few. I don't often hear the second part of that conversation, which is why? Why are we the few?
Mm,
What can we do to make that less so that, there are more ways to access, a meaningful existence which isn't full of self-destruction, whatever that entails. And that's, I think, a big part of why I enjoy doing the work that I do, which is about trying to find as many different creative and interesting ways for someone to achieve a meaningful existence, whatever that is.
so I think what you're kind of this how I'm hearing it, and also something I really subscribe to, is sometimes it's about having that person as the space whilst people work it out.
Yeah.
Literally that simple, that secure attachment where people can, you know, make mistakes, grow, work it out. There's no shame. There's no sort of like you're an awful person. Let's be curious about this. What's standing in the way? Um,
It's a fairly unforgiving world. Like
yeah,
there isn't a lot of time or space to get stuff wrong, whether that's emotionally, physically, financially,
yeah,
chronologically. We are constantly bombarded by messages that we're already behind the curve, that
yeah,
other people are out there doing way better than us, that we are, and it's perfectly built for someone who has, the kind of foundational messaging that I have, which is, Jazz, you are lacking, you're not good enough, you won't be good enough, all of that. And then the world and advertisement and everything else really doubles down on that. So having that space where, as an adult, or as a young person trying to re-engineer my relationship with myself and my world, having someone go, you're allowed to get this wrong.
yeah.
You're allowed to find this really difficult. You're allowed to, when people said to me, you're allowed to find just getting through one day without hurting yourself. You're allowed to find that really hard.
Yeah, yeah,
Logically, other people might not have the same patience, but there are lots of people here who've been through that experience,
yeah,
and we found it hard.
yeah. And also, I validation. I understand why you found it hard. It's really hard trying to manage in a world where a larger proportion of people might find certain things easier by virtue of the way that their brain might work a bit different. And the school system assumes one style of learning, one style of experiencing, one style of, thinking, feeling. No wonder you feel that way.
Yeah, yeah. I just think that it's been really revelatory for me as I sort of learn more and more of what I thought was just, oh, it's just how I am, and then going, oh, actually, that's written about quite extensively in like ADHD, in research and in clinical notes and all these things, and I'm going, oh wow, there is a community. And this is a community full of hugely successful and wonderful people. This is not a community of people that are lacking in something, like I grew up believing I lacked in something.
I was on someone else's podcast a week or so ago, and it was on eating disorders and trauma. And bless, I mean, this just summarized it all for me. I got an email from them afterwards, and the email said, um, oh my gosh, I need to find it. It was so brilliant. It said, "Hi Jodie, thanks so much for yesterday. I'm still in a state of shock that someone else adds hair washing to their to-do list." And that was the email. And I was just like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I remember speaking to someone ages ago. about figuring out how we're going to keep a tab on everything that they might need to do in a week or in a day. And the conversation was, thing is, I write the list, and writing the list alone is it's too much. And then I feel like, well, I've done the thing now. I've written the list. So actually doing the things on the list, I don't have the energy for yet. I don't feel like I can do that. And I was like, yeah, that's great. I'm exactly the same because people have forever told me to, write lists, write a to-do list, plan. It takes a disproportionate amount of my brain power to plan stuff, especially when I'm on my own. And I think that I've utilized so many people around me in my life, sometimes with them being aware of it, and sometimes without them
Yeah,
being aware of it. I just sort of employ them for 15 minutes to sit next to me while I complete
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And it's so nice to sort of like finally have the language for, you know, for the things that we do and kind of make sense out of it. And I think, this lady who emailed me, because it's not stuff that's normally spoken about. And I said to her, oh yeah, I need to write everything down, because if I don't write it down, it just can't happen, because I need to sequence it visually. And when I showed her that I wrote down wash my hair in my diary, she was just like amazed.
yeah, but I just think that throughout this conversation and throughout all the conversations that I've had with yourself and individuals like yourself who really focus in this sphere of work and human experience, I think the consistent message is as we've already covered, which is we have to open up a conversation so that people realize and really feel that they are allowed to ask, that they're allowed to express that they don't know what to do. It baffles me that it's so. I don't know. Is it judged to appear that you don't know what to do? We have. I mean, I know this is a genuine question. I don't know. Is it that society is generally built around this very externalized perfectionism, which is you should just know how to do everything. You should just know how to get it right first time. And if you don't, that's on you.
Mm,
So again, there's a complete lack of grace,
yeah,
which I don't know when it happens. It's possibly your late childhood into adolescence, where we stop giving people as much grace with getting things wrong or not knowing how
yeah.
to do.
There's the developmental norms. So because your birthday was yesterday, there's now these expectations on you that I didn't have yesterday, but I have today.
Yeah,
People don't, unfortunately, bodies, brains don't read those manuals. We need to meet people where they're at. What keeps you hopeful in this space, in the work that you do as a coach?
I think that one thing that keeps me hopeful in my work is that I have seen for 10 years, I've seen people keep trying. I've seen humans keep showing up for themselves through huge levels of distress and pain. I've seen people extend themselves for others so consistently. Um, I saw people do it for me.
Yeah,
Um, I've seen people with almost endless amounts of patience and kindness for others. Like real, like admirable levels of patience where I just think, wow, like I would love to have that in all things. So really visible individuals who are attempting to make positive change in interacting with human beings. And I think that I think what I didn't realize when I stepped into this field is that I needed to do something which I felt was of benefit to me and others
yeah,
in work in general. And I didn't know that about myself until I started doing it.
yeah.
And I think that's really, for me, it's really simple and it is ever present, which is I will keep doing this up until the point where I think I can't be of benefit to another human being here. I'm really lucky to work in a very human industry.
Yeah.
And
And I
um,
think we're really lucky because, we have a lot of colleagues in common, and we're lucky that we're surrounded by some pretty awesome people.
yeah, but again, that like getting surrounded by them being visible and being present and giving time and giving their knowledge and expertise
Yeah,
and sharing that rather than just going, I know stuff, but I'm not going to share it with other people just in case they take my
yeah,
ideas
there's a
or
lot of generosity.
yeah, yeah.
Last of all, Jazz, if there is a neurodivergent person out there struggling, maybe it could be with addiction, what, or with their mental health, what would you want them to hear?
There are so many different things that I could say, and it's like choosing which one.
Do you know
Um,
what? I'm going to be kind here. You can have two.
okay, probably be this. If this is anything like my experience, it will feel like this will never end, and I promise you it will. I think that needing to hear that it
That
moves.
there is hope, and
Yeah,
when you kind of maybe get in with the right people or the right services or people who understand that, that there are possibilities.
Yeah, which leads me to the second one, which is you, you're allowed to ask questions of as many people as you want. And when you find the answers that you connect with or the way that they're communicated with you, great. It's what I did. And for whatever reason I was moved around. I moved around a lot of different service providers, and I can really look back on it and go, oh, when I started to move through a process, in a positive manner, it's because the service providers were communicating with me in a way that I really connected with. They
Yeah,
just managed to uh, help me feel heard and then help me figure out a meaningful way forward. And that
yeah,
took some time, and it's okay that it took some time, and I can say that now, but it was really difficult to understand that back then.
yeah. You
It
needed to
wasn't my
find the
fault.
place. Yeah, it wasn't your fault. It was you needed to find the place that could, I guess, hold you in a
Yeah,
way that felt safe.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
immediately I'm going, I really wish I'd had something more revelatory to say, something which is just groundbreaking and a little bit funny and a little bit like heartwarming at the same time. And everyone goes, wow, that was it. That was the
But
thing.
but people are going to do that anyway, because sometimes it is like that really simple stuff.
Yes. And that's devastating. Honestly, so much of my wellness, I was devastated by how fundamental it had to be. It wasn't like all that glossy neon lights, big things, dramatic things. No, no, no. It was in the small moments, in the punctuation between my days. It was the hair washing. It was, like putting that cup in a cupboard. It was like folding my clothes. It was that. It was tending to myself in a way that I had no natural inclination to do.
Where can people find you? Where do you have to share where you work?
Yeah, I work for an organization called Portobello Behavioural Health. Um, I am always around for a chat. I love a conversation, genuinely.
What's your role there? I mean, you mentioned obviously you're a coach, but what's your role there?
I am the head of the coaching department at the company, so I train and look after coaches as they are doing the work now, because in all the years of doing this, it was so vital for me to have people to reach out to on the work that I was doing so that I felt supported. And a huge part of what I do now is help provide that for others when they are working with clients. I'm hugely passionate about coaching and about how it's delivered in appropriate settings.
I know that you are deeply ethical. There is a lot of stuff out there about coaching and therapy and staying within your scope. And for you, is there a way that when someone engages with a coach, is there something that they can do to check that maybe that coach is working ethically? And also, what is the difference between a coach versus perhaps other mental health professionals as you see it?
Oh, great questions. Firstly, there are so many different ways. Let's focus on the first one, which is what can someone do to ask? And I think it very much depends on what you're hoping to achieve through that coaching relationship. I'm a huge believer in not working in isolation. I think that given that I've spent my career working with vulnerable individuals, I need to be supervised. I need to work within an ecosystem which ensures that someone is observing the work I do so that I don't get lost in my own belief of what I think I'm delivering as appropriate. I need to have someone
So,
holding me accountable to that.
so does that person have a supervisor? If they don't have a supervisor, are they a part of maybe an accrediting body where there's a complaints procedure, etc., etc.? Do they work as part of a team?
You also you have the right to not decide immediately. Like, please don't feel pressured into accepting anything. It's so important that the person that you're working with, you feel that you can work with them. um, it is it is an unregulated part of the industry. Everybody is really acutely aware of that. So
So I guess what are the things that perhaps would be red flags if I changed my second question? And I went to that question thinking about perhaps coaches who don't have clinical training, who perhaps start going into giving clinical advice, perhaps.
yes, so role integrity, and that is the sort of the combination of those two questions that you've raised
Okay.
there. Coaching is not therapy. So it is not the place to do an emotional investigation and deep dive into, the past and processes. And, there are lots of coaches who are trauma informed and lots of people who are also trained as therapists who do coaching, and there's lots of overlap. So
So,
importantly, it's about asking those questions of what role are they inhabiting and how do they deliver that? And how do they respond when these things arise in the coaching session? My absolute ideal is that coaching works alongside therapy.
Sure.
because you have someone who is skilled and trained in helping an individual navigate that emotional piece. And coaching, some of its strength is that it's human, but it's practical.
Sure.
And it holds like a real lightness of being in the world as well. So red flags, it's red flags. I mean, obviously the usual things, anybody who's misrepresenting their training, anybody who um I'm not a big believer in belligerent recovery outlooks. You know, this is what you have to do.
Um,
Coaching at its absolute best works in someone's natural community and is about helping them create a self-sustaining indigenous community and ecosystem which will sustain them long after you are gone. A coach's job is to work themselves out of their role.
I say that about being a therapist. It's that
It's,
with some of my clients, my job is to work myself out of the job.
yeah, 100%. It should be empowering. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. Jazz, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for asking me and for the conversation. It's been amazing.